Material for the Brain. Conversations for Thinking Bodies. Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Material for the Brain podcast. My guest for today is Shai Faran, who is an Israeli dancer, teacher and a choreographer based in Berlin. Shai has a large base of followers from all over the globe, with whom she is sharing her perspective on dance, movement, and teaching what she calls a life practice. I met Shai 7.5 years ago during my dance education, and from our first meeting, she struck me as a person who lives life in a very intensive and interesting way. We have collaborated in several occasions, from teaching together, performing together, making art, and her way of handling herself professionally and personally is very inspiring for me. So I was very happy to be able to have this conversation with her and to share it with you, and I hope that you will find it inspiring as well. And as this is the last episode for 2020, I would like to take a moment to wish you all a happy new year and a positive transition to the next one. Hello, Shai. Welcome to my podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy to host you, my friend. How are you? What are you doing? Where are you? What is going on in your life?
Well, I'm in Berlin at the moment, at home. It's a tricky time for everyone, so I'm mostly here. Also traveling a little bit for some teaching and some work, but mostly at home, doing some work online with some students and some work here with myself. But there is, a bit of this feeling of like a suspension in the air, which I think is also nice to take this time to kind of like, dive in a little bit more and invest more in my own, internal development and finding the inspiration from within, which is not always easy. But this is more or less what is happening right now.
And do you find like what do you do now when you mean to find more time for internal things? Like what is keeping you busy?
I find myself more reading, more listening to, podcasts, conversations of people about different topics that, are interesting for me, but I don't always have the time to do that. So it's a nice time to have kind of like, I spend time at home and in the background I have like some videos going where I listen to people talking about stuff. And yeah, I feel how this is kind of like nourishing something from the inside, or like, a bit more time for reflection. And also it's the longest time that I've been home without traveling for the last, like, I don't know, 6-7 years. So there is something very different about it. But also nice to have more of a routine, more of a somehow like a casual daily routine. I mean, it's not so much of a routine in the sense of like, it's not like I go to work, I come back. It's like in that sense it's a bit different, and I have a very flexible schedule. But that feeling of like being in the same place, observing how my plants are growing slowly, um, it's something interesting and nice to have after many years of not having it, and in a way missing it. But I also love what I do. So I've been traveling a lot, and it's nice to be a bit more local. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because in our field of work, many people are traveling a lot, and it's somehow a very established thing to do, no, to travel. But me, because I have two kids, I'm not traveling so much, so I feel like the entire field can experience what I'm used to experience of being more at home and doing the traveling becomes more the rare thing and not the routine. Shai, maybe you can tell a little bit the audience, for those who haven't heard your name or don't know you, if you could tell a little bit about your background. How did you enter the field of dance and movement, and kind of a brief scan of what you've been doing in the last years, and also a little bit of your history.
Yeah. Um, so I'm originally from Israel. I grew up in the north of Israel, in the kind of like the countryside. I mean, it's always funny to say north in Israel because it's anyway so small, but still it's the north. And I started to dance when I was maybe like 10 or 11. My sister was dancing, my older sister was dancing, and I think it was something that I always kind of, looked up to her. And my mother used to dance when she was young, so it was kind of a thing that was around. Um, I was studying in a Steiner school, like an anthroposophic education. Um, so for the ones that don't know, like there was a big emphasis on like art and uh, kind of like developing the individual side of each and every kid or person. So I would say those two things like were very present when I was young. I grew up into that, into kind of like very um, artistic, I would say, environment. But it's not like I thought about it as artistic at that time. It was just kind of like my experience of growing up. And then I think from a pretty young age, like I would say maybe 14, 15, there was kind of a realization that dance is the thing for me. Um, it's not like it was in one day or something like this, but it was a growing feeling inside of me. And I think also the feeling that I will probably not live in Israel. Like I never felt very connected to Israel as a place and as a geographical place, and I always felt quite attracted to the north of the planet, and in terms of like dance and the dance scene, like more to Europe. Um, yeah, so I did like a dance major when I was in high school. It became more and more like a kind of a dominant thing in my life, and then um, I went to like a kind of a private higher education in dance after high school in Haifa for 2 years. And then from there, I was dancing in the kibbutz company, in the young company for one season, and I did some projects in Israel and some stuff, and I started to feel kind of a need for more information, or like I felt there is much more to discover, and I decided to move to Europe. Um, I moved to Salzburg and I did 1 year in the postgraduate program in SEED, where we met also.
Very important moment in your career.
Yeah. Um, and after that, I moved to France, to Lyon, and I was dancing there for Yuval Pik, an Israeli choreographer that is working there. Um, and while I was living in France, I started to develop some connections and some kind of a relationship with Berlin and with the dance scene in Berlin. And I decided to move here. Um, And since then, I've been here, and I was doing some projects like as a freelance dancer, and also making my own work. And then at a certain point, I started to kind of shift more into the teaching and education. And I mean, somehow the teaching was always present. Like I started to teach when I was like 18 or something like this. And I think it was something that I always liked, and I felt like I have something to give through that uh, platform, or like through that way of transmitting um, information or giving people experiences. But yeah, somehow like I actually have a very clear memory of the moment that I was on stage as a dancer, and the whole scenario just seemed like very strange for me. And it was kind of like a point where I couldn't go back, and being on stage became like something very weird. Like I
And
couldn't,
what was this feeling of peculiarity that you experienced? Like, what made?
like, I remember I was on the stage, like it was a group piece. I was with the 5 other dancers, and we were walking in a line at the front of the stage. It was somewhere in France, and there was, like these theaters where the stage is like a bit high. So the people in the first row, they are kind of like at the level of the stage. And I remember standing there, we were holding hands, and I could see the people sitting in the darkness. And I just felt like, that's weird. Like, what is this? Like, why am I here and they are there? And somehow, like, my whole perception of performing changed, and there were a lot of questions that opened up, and I felt like this doesn't make sense for me anymore. um, I still did some performing after, and I still worked um, as a dancer, but I felt like the role of dance in my life kind of changed in that moment. Uh, it became something else, and something more of a, like a kind of a platform to see the world through it, not only in an artistic context and not only in a performative context, but also just as a practice, and um, as a way to help people, as a way to get to know myself better, as a way to practice like life principles um, through movement. Um, yeah, and then I like this took a bigger part in my life gradually, the teaching. And then also this went through some kind of transformation, where when I felt um, I was teaching a lot of open workshops and open classes, and then like this thing of meeting new people all the time. um, I got very exhausted also by that. um, that feeling of like, you go somewhere, you teach a workshop, you give everything, but you never see the people again, and you don't know what was the impact of your presence. And um, I started to kind of shift into more of a process oriented work and teaching. So um, I started to teach more in like um, programs or structures for like higher education in dance, like BA and MA programs, and in different universities. And I also started to have my own following of students that expressed some kind of an interest to stick around and to follow a certain process that I could offer. um, and then because of the reality of like traveling, being in different places, I started to also um, teach online those people that showed the interest to stay involved in my work. Um, yeah and this became like a kind of a main thing. And nowadays I feel there is a bit of a going back in me, like going back to that need of also having more of more of, I would say, like a performative or an artistic expression um, through the dance, and not just the practice and the teaching. Like I start to feel again the need to do that, but from a very different perspective, or like from a very different point of view and after different experiences. So I'm quite excited and curious what that would bring. Um, but yeah, this is kind of like, the chain of events, I would say.
It's very interesting. Although I know you, it's very interesting to hear it, because yeah, it gives us a different perspective about what I know about you, and the person you are and the teacher you are.
Mm.
Uh, I, the first question I wanted to ask you, or maybe it's already the second. Um, Nowadays, there is, when I look around, um, what is became to known like the movement scene, movement practitioners. One term that I see very often being used in different contexts and different meanings is the word self-practice.
Mm.
And everybody has a self-practice, or everybody needs to develop a self-practice. Uh, but from all the people that I know in the world, personally, you're one of the most dedicated practitioners that I've met. And I would definitely, it's definitely something that inspired me in you to see what does it, how does someone can actually maintain a self-practice, and what does it mean in practicality and conceptually. So maybe you can share with me and with the audience, what does it mean for you to have your own self-practice?
Mm. Um, I think that the concept of like self practice or practicing alone was not at all present, like when I was younger, or like in the dance environment. Like nobody uh, nobody really talked about it. And I was always like a very hard worker, so I like to do more. But for me, like to do more was, I take more classes, I go to more, like, yeah, I just take more classes, and that would be like practicing more. And when I met Ido Portal, um, and we became quite close, and like I was teaching him and he was teaching me. And
Maybe you can say a few words. Who is Ido Portal? Because maybe some people wouldn't know.
yeah, so with Obertal, well, we met when we both still lived in Israel. And um, he actually hired me in the beginning to teach him. But then there was kind of a very we had an exchange of information, inspiration, many things. Like we became close friends. And he started what is known now as the movement culture. And like his work is like spreading around the whole world. And I was very um, happy and privileged to be part of it. uh, I've been teaching in his events also, and um, became more and more involved with his work, which um, I think he would present somehow as like a movement perspective. Like not being specialized in any specific discipline, but kind of like picking the good stuff from each and every discipline to see what is common actually, or like what is applicable and what is valuable from each um, perspective. Um, so it was around the time when I met him where he asked me, why do you never practice alone? Like you always go, you take more classes, but like you never practice alone. Um, and it was not like it was shocking or anything, but it was just like, nobody really said anything about that. And I started to do that, to kind of spend more time with myself, practicing the things that I learned from other people. And I think that like the moment or like the period of time where it really started to happen was after I was in Salzburg, um, and I met Martin Kilvadi, um, which became then later a teacher and a close friend. Um,
Who's also maybe good to mention a dancer and a
yes,
performer.
yes, an amazing dancer and an amazing performer and an amazing human being. Um, and I met Martin in Salzburg. I spent some time with him there, and I felt like I was there was so much information. He was for me like an endless spring of information, knowledge, experience, inspiration, that I finished that year in Salzburg, and I felt like I have to practice all of this because otherwise it will be gone. Like it will just, like it will dissolve and I will lose it. And I had kind of like half a year between the time I finished my year in Salzburg and the time that I was supposed to start to work in a company. And I just took this half a year to practice the things I learned from him. It was what I would call maybe like movement scores or like principles, and some things were very technical, some things were more open, but I started from that. I started from practicing the things he was teaching, and with the time it just started to transform, to change into my own ideas, into my own ways of understanding it. And I think that something that is really that I can say that is a big part for me in that term self practice. Um, it's something that, like Martin calls it, first hand knowledge. Like when you have the experience of what you are talking about or like what you're doing, like you can learn something from someone else, but you need to embody it, you need to make it yourself, you need to have that first hand knowledge. And I think also today when I teach other people, or I have students that are like studying in different schools and university, or I still feel like you need to spend time alone practicing what you learned in the classes, because most of the chances that the way that it was taught, the rhythm of it, like the amount of time that you were given, the details, like it was probably not 100% fitting to your own needs. So then you need to know how to make kind of a process for yourself to learn better what the teacher was teaching. And I think this is a big part of the self practice, is like to take something and to make it your own, but not in the sense of like that you need to change it, but just to take the time that you need to really learn it, and people have so many different ways to learn and to understand things. And also as a teacher, I know I cannot always uh, address everybody's needs. So I try to give like as much as I can, but I also have to remember that everybody will have to do their own work to do the process of like understanding the material in the best way. So I think this is one important part of what I would call self practice. It's like this time of being with yourself doing that.
It's interesting because I'm gonna stop you for a moment just to share some reflection to what I've heard, that in a way you're emphasizing the point that by going into the studio, the gym, the dojo, whatever, wherever in whatever space you practice,
Mm.
and, and doing things that you've been taught by yourself, you're actually changing a little bit your relationship to the material, because you need to become your own teacher. and you need to break down to yourself in a way that you would actually embody the concept a little bit deeper. And it seems like that self-practice, maybe according to how you describe it, is in a way the beginning point for teaching practice as well.
Yeah, it could be. Like, I think, yeah, to be a good teacher, somehow you need to try to consider um, as many of those self practices as possible. Like you need to understand better the different ways of different people how to learn things, and to try to address as much as possible. But because you cannot do that, maybe a more smarter thing to do is to teach people how to learn so they can build that process for themselves. So I think this is definitely like one aspect of what I would call self practice. And then I think another aspect would be, um, which can start from the same point, but to let things develop from you. Like, and then, yeah, you can start from things that you learned from someone else. Like I said about things I learned from Martin, but just by giving the time, it transformed into something else. I started to have more ideas about it. I started to modify it, to change it, to, and then it became my own thing. It was not that anymore. Like it became, it grew like to different directions. And I feel that this could only happen because of the time that I invested, like being with myself and digging into those things. And I think that another thing I would call self practice, it's somehow finding the ways to connect everything that you do uh, in the practice to your life, or this is maybe what I would call like a life practice, that things are not separated anymore. So I don't have that feeling of like when I leave the studio, the work is left there and my life is separated from it. But for me, it's all connected, and it's not just with dance. Like I do other things, I do whatever, I play the guitar, I do pottery, I anything I do is, for me, it's the same. It's all like platforms or environments to practice the same principles, or to um yeah, to learn things, um yeah, to create applications, to create connections all the time. Like I think if things are staying too isolated, it doesn't make much sense. So I think that the self practice is also something that is related to that, because when I have my own interest, I created something, like something started to bubble in me, it became my own interest, then it only makes sense that I will look for it in anything that I do. And I think it's something we know from many experiences, like even if, I don't know, you want to buy new shoes, so suddenly you notice everyone's shoes in the street, or like you're like, this would be nice, or this, or like they say that women that are pregnant, like suddenly it looks like everyone is pregnant, or like you start to notice what you are interested in. So for me, this is also like with dance or with movement or with any practice is the same. Like if I am interested in something, it's my responsibility to create those connections, I think.
Very interesting.
Mm.
One thing that popped in my mind when you were describing um, your definition or your relation to self-practice is that there is a certain commitment to solitude. I would say, like to really being with yourself. And I remember that as a young kid, I was very interested in meditation, and I went and I lived for half a year in a meditation center and spent many hours with myself. And there was a certain feeling or a certain acknowledgement that actually before I can I can start to connect to the world, I need to really connect to myself. Or if I want to be able to hug somebody, first I need to take some time to hug myself. And I feel a certain similarity. What is your relationship to being with yourself alone? Because I know you've spent many hours in the studio alone, which if I'm being honest, uh, uh, for me it's not that easy, even though I do consider myself as somebody who is dedicating time to practice. But my comfort zone will be a partner, to do
Mm.
partner work, to be with another human being, or with a group, of course. But that's something that I've noticed, that you have a big capacities. And what is there for you beside the movement in these
Mm.
moments with yourself?
Um, yeah, I think it's true. I have quite a big capacity to be alone, to be with myself, to be busy with my own thoughts and ideas. And actually, many of the things I've been teaching, of course, or that I've been developing, of course, they were influenced by things I I learned or like I experienced from outside or from other people. But many things I feel they kind of like came from within me, or like I had some kind of an interest in something and I went to read about it, or to learn about it. And then like I feel there is a huge like fountain of things like inside. And I think I was always like, also as a kid, like I had quite a rich imagination or internal life. Like I could always spend time with myself. Um, and it's not like for me it's always easy, like I also have days where I go to work alone and it's difficult. And I think also nowadays I am feeling more need to actually work with people, like to be in the studio with people, or like to have, and for sure also there are things that's like, I mean, I said like I feel it's an endless fountain of inspiration, but for sure there are things you cannot do alone. And um, I often also miss guidance, or it's been always very important for me to have also like a role of a teacher in my life, that I can, that there is something with a different perspective, or like a higher perspective than the one that I have, so I can be challenged also by that. um, but I don't know really how to say like what is there for me. It's yeah, it's just I feel it's a necessity. Like I feel it's something I owe myself somehow, to have that time. If I don't have it, I get irritated, I get grumpy, like I get, I need it. And I think different people find it in different places. Um, and there are also periods that I don't want to be alone in the studio or at all, and it's difficult. But I think it's part of the journey. And especially nowadays, like with all these crisis where we are really like we cannot meet people as we could before. And I am really missing the face to face interaction, and working like frontal, be in front of people, and touch, and share the space. So I do feel that necessity also. But yeah, maybe it's a thing that I always had, and I just found a way to kind of navigate it into my own favor when it came to dance. um yeah.
It's interesting to hear you're sharing more the human aspect of being or engaging in self practice, because um, I think to a certain degree, it invites us also to enter a certain space of vulnerability with ourselves. And many times we can avoid it by having a very goal-oriented tasks. So then, like, then you don't need to ask the why question and all.
Mm.
But I mean, I remember I had a conversation with an Israeli improvisation teacher named Yuval Goldstein, and he mentioned something that for him, going to the studio to work sometimes means lying on the floor and staring at the ceiling, and embodying also being lost. So in a way, like the space with ourselves is also an invitation to feel that to be with the full range of mental possibilities, emotional possibilities, and not only with this one quality of, let's say, hard working or lazy working or whatever quality that you bring to the studio. But because I think that when we are with people, and maybe that's something that maybe now when I talk with you, I can reflect also on my own engagement in the studio. So when I'm in people, there is always a certain social interaction that uh, that can very often bring the better side of you, because you want to be nice to people. If you always act like an asshole, nobody would want to practice with you. So you're trying to bring the better self when you interact with people. But when you are alone, you're alone. So it's like you can also let the shadows be present, and
Yeah, and I think there is also like the that state or that thought of what means to work. It's also something that, yeah, like this thing of like working hard, it doesn't always mean the same thing, because maybe for me, actually, what is for someone else working hard, for me it's easy. So for me to work hard is to do less, maybe, like. So now lately I find days where I'm just at home and I kind of like, I would maybe like dance around a bit, and then like I fold the laundry, and then I do some handstand, and then I take care of my plants, and then I do some chin ups, and then I clean the floor. Like everything becomes like a one mishmash of like all the things that there are to do, and it's it's all work, and in the same time it's just life, it's just what it is. um yeah, in a way, like I feel I don't really have that separation so much also. um yeah.
yeah, I can really identify with it. But it's hard for me also to kind of pinpoint when did this shift started to be more present in my life. That, and I think we talked a little bit about it also in private moments, like how the, let's say, the moment this kind of embodiment program is installed in you, it's like it's always on, or to a certain degree, maybe not always, but most of the time. And then, as you said, like when you're folding the laundry, you still kind of in relationship to your body. And that's for me something that I consider very, very fundamental in what I took from dance. That's what dance taught me. And and I wanted also to ask you, because you've mentioned Ido Portal, and this kind of entering into what is called kind of more a um, general practice, like studying different things. And I know that you've also been doing many different things, from a lot of strength and conditioning work and balancing and martial art and other stuff. But nevertheless, I think that even when you worked within the flagship of movement practice, you always carried the torch of dance. And like you and why dance?
um well, like I said, I think dance is just was just like a how to say, like a medium that works for me, like I feel it's something that allows me to, like, I see things through it, like I use it to 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 digest things, to practice things, to, I often, if there is something I feel I'm stuck with in my life, I would try to think, what would that mean in my body? And then I would maybe practice it as a dance, and maybe through that I would understand things about it. So for example, like lately I had this thought about like oppositions, like it's just like I had a talk with a friend and I felt like there is a lot of oppositions, like different perspectives, different directions. And I just thought, like, what would that mean in my body? If every time I do a movement to a certain direction, something has to move to a different direction. Like there is always a counter direction that is being activated. And then through doing that and completely dropping the original thought, I got to understand more about it. And then I take it back into, kind of like the more of a life situation. And so it's just like it's a platform, like I felt like this is for me the way. And I met people that, that they are using different platforms to do that. And I think this is beautiful. And, for someone it would be like making juice. And for someone it will be like, yeah, martial art or painting or anything. And I think that coming from that world of dance and knowing what it has to offer, and then being exposed to the world of the movement culture and the work of Ido, and realizing also what this has to offer, I felt a certain responsibility to create some kind of a bridge. So in a way, I felt like I cannot let go of that thing, like, because I feel like I could pull out so much from here and bring it there, and then from here and bring it there. And I think, like if I try to think about it in the most kind of practical or like flat way, um, there is something in like the working, how to say, like yeah, just like the programming, the practicality of how to do things, how to build a process, that like all those things I learned from Ido, I could take it and apply it into my teaching of dance. And I saw and I still see how this, like, those are amazing tools and amazing pieces of information that are just missing in the dance world, because a lot of it is also based on traditions. And like there are certain ways how things are being done, and not many are questioning those ways. Um, and then also the other way around, like maybe in a more kind of a practical technical environment, that would be missing the um, the unknown, the artistic, the mysterious, like the ugly, the playful, like a lot of things that as dancers, like we are very used to, like focusing on something that is not even shown from outside. um, so I felt like I have a lot to give on both directions. And yeah, like I said, it almost at a certain point I felt like I have a responsibility, because I found myself in that bridge. um, and I felt like, yeah, it's just too good to not do that.
Mm.
And I think also I always felt in me that, like, there is something in the dance as a field or as an art form that I just I am not interested to let go of. Like, I think that it has things to offer that you cannot find in other fields.
And what are those things for you?
For me, I
If you can
think,
verbalize them, of course.
um, well, one thing I think I would say it's related to something with sensations. Like for me, the experience of dance, it's related to the sensations within my body. And it's not like I cannot sense my body when I do something else, but somehow the focus about that aspect of the movement or of the body is different in the dance. And also maybe one thing is that like you cannot define it, like, I mean, it's such a philosophical question, and like what is dance, or what it means for me, it's not the same like what it means for you. And but still somehow we know that we are talking about the same thing. Or I had a lot of very interesting conversations also with Rasmus Ölme, that he's the director of the Danish National School of Performing Arts in Copenhagen. I mean, the director of the dance department. And he has this thing that he says sometimes in his classes, like, consider this dance. And that phrase somehow makes what you're doing into a dance, but like you don't know what exactly is it that did that. And I think there is something like, yeah, that it's just so mysterious, it's so tricky, it's so ungraspable. And I have sometimes, like I could, maybe from outside somebody will look and would think like, wow, this is really dancing. But for me, I felt like 10 seconds where the dance came into me and then went away. But it's really not something that I could say like, okay, if I do this and this, I dance. But at the same time, I also cannot just sit and wait for it to come and then I ride on, it's like, it's yeah, it's a very vague, complex, and beautiful thing that I didn't find that that kind of discussion, or that kind of like, yeah, that kind of talk in anywhere else. um yeah.
It's like first I was a little bit surprised how you, from your first explanation about my question of why dance. So
Mm.
I mean, and in a way, it somehow for me was also a reflection of how you changed as a person from the first time I met you and the first time we shared some space teaching together or working with students together. Because your answer was very undogmatic, and it was very beautiful answer for me to hear, that this kind of acknowledgement that there is nothing objectively miraculous about dance, and that you can do it by working, as you said, this kind of funny example, you can do it by learning how to make juices maybe. But at the same time, it doesn't undermine that for you it can be something very unique that you cannot get anywhere else. And in a way, it really relates to kind of the mental emotional place that I am right now in my life, because I feel that there's many processes in society now that are being really polarized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for sure, the Corona crisis is one catalyst, social media, but that society becomes more and more dogmatic. So, like, if you believe in something, then there must be some kind of objective truth in it, and therefore, somebody else who doesn't believe in it is wrong.
Mm.
Versus the ability to really stand in kind of in a middle point and recognize, as you described, this kind of everlasting relationship between the uniqueness for the individual and the let's say the mundane for the universe, because it's, I think it's true that yes, that dance doesn't carry a meaning unless you make it meaningful for yourself. And yeah, and it was also nice to hear like what, and I can very relate to what you said about sensations, because I've also I didn't grow up in dance like you. I grew up as a basketball player, and if there is something I didn't learn during all my years of training as a basketball player is to sense my body. I've learned how to be very sensitive with an object, to fit to connect to movement of other people, but I didn't sense my body, and I see it in many disciplines that people can become amazing practitioners in whatever they're doing, but this kind of foundational layer of just sensing the body is missing. And that is something that I agree with you, that is very, very present in the world of contemporary dance. And I think it's a big gift to
but
everyday life.
I also think that somehow it's present, but it's not like it is always being taught specifically, you know? Like, I mean, I never did actually like a proper high education in dance, you know? I don't have a degree. I don't have, like, I didn't do the kind of traditional, you know, like a 4 years kind of studies or, and I think in those kind of structures, you know, when you actually do like a BA or something like this, in those higher levels, there is more of a talk about this, and you're really being taught, or like you're really being educated to connect to the sensations, and somehow in the way that my process took place, it was not really present in that sense, you know. Like, I mean, of course you always hear those phrases like feel your weight, sense the floor, like, you know, ground yourself, feel your seat bones. But like, it's kind of like, I find there are a lot of these phrases that as dancers we're kind of used to hear, but like, what does it mean? You know, drop your weight. What does it mean? Like, sense your shoulder blades. Like, a lot of things are kind of vague, and I think this is also something that asks for self practice, you know, like to take time and to understand what does it mean for me, like where is my, you know, like how, like I don't have access to it, like I cannot really sense it, so like how do I develop a relationship with it? And yeah, in a way, like there is this gift in dance, but also it's I find it's not always something that is specifically addressed. It's just like it's present in that environment somehow.
But wouldn't you agree that because it's so present, that to a certain degree, if you will be present enough around those spaces, you will develop a certain sense of connection to the sensation and being able to sense your body?
Yeah, yeah, probably you would, but probably you would do it better if you would actually work on that. Like, you know, if you would actually spend the time for that. And I know like many people do that, like many teachers also offer this kind of stuff, but still I think it has to go through that process of like first-hand knowledge where you really embody like what does it mean, and that you really decide to put your focus on it. And like I said before, you know, if you have that interest, you will find it everywhere because you have your body all the time. So like you can sense things, like you can make every moment in your day into practicing the sensations within your body. um and yeah.
And what would you say about the idea? Because I think one thing that definitely happens, and when you start sensing your body, and for me, I would consider it really as something fundamental, and that's also something that I would like to ask you later. So you start sensing your body, and then you start recognizing that certain things feels better for your body, certain things feels not so meeting your current capacity or your needs. And there is a certain landslide that we can fall into of kind of not of categorizing certain sensations as like negative, dangerous, unhealthy, and our kind of self-awareness, our increased sense of self-awareness can also support us conceptually in those conclusions, like, yeah, I know my body, and I've seen it many times that working with professional dancers, you do something that is maybe a little bit, I don't know, like, let's say in contemporary dance, for example, you practice a lot to be very soft with the floor. And in martial art, many times you're deliberately hitting the floor. And then I would suggest something like this, and many people would look as if oh no, this is going to be dangerous for me because. So how do you prevent this oversensitivity that we develop to get into a place that it becomes your limitation?
I think then you need to develop some kind of a trust. I mean, if it's, if you put yourself in a situation where someone else is leading you into an unknown or like, an area that is unknown to you, for sure you need to have trust in that person in order to go for it, and to also have kind of a trust, or maybe not trust, but like to remind yourself that like you don't know. And but I don't know, it's very tricky. I think if somebody comes and tell me like, yeah, I don't feel I need to do that, like it feels too painful, it puts me in a very tricky situation, no? Because on one hand I would say like, okay, I don't know what you're feeling, like I don't know how it feels, so like you take care of yourself. But then on the other hand, I also feel like saying like, this cannot be bad for you, like nothing bad can happen to you. And there are all these like fears and protection mechanisms that some of them are there for good reason and to protect us, and some of them, like you say, they just make us like oversensitive and prevent us from actually discovering more possibilities. But I don't think that becoming more sensitive, like, or more in contact with your sensations is that thing that will prevent you from, hitting the floor or something like this. Maybe even um, maybe even the opposite. Like, it's not that becoming more sensible will also make you more sensitive in the way of, like if I become very sensitive, like I become very aware of the sensations on my skin, it doesn't mean that now, like when it's hot, I will be too hot, or when it's cold, I will be too cold. I will just be better at observing if it's hot or cold. So I don't think that like increasing that awareness for the sensations is what will prevent me from those experiences.
Yeah, I would agree with you that it's definitely not connected to the actual, let's if we call it a technical skill to be able to sense your body. So for sure, the technical skill doesn't imply that. So I wonder, maybe it's something about dance culture or the type of teacher and influences that I've personally encountered. And I've not
That there is too much sensitivity, you mean? Like,
yeah,
too much carefulness.
that there is a certain that sensitivity to the body already means something specific. And I think that when I hear you, I hear something that is more neutral. You're saying, okay, I can sense my body and I can apply it in a moment where I do a chin up and I contract all my muscles, and I can apply it when I don't know, do shavasana and try to relax on the floor. I'm just taking these two polarities. But I've just noticed it that there is a certain tendency, if I need to generalize, I did a lot of dancing in my life, and now I do a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA and stuff like this. And there is a very, very different sensitivity to the body there. Maybe a little bit the opposite, but definitely nobody is shying away from, like being completely discomfortable, and to the degree that there is also a risk in that, and sometimes
Yeah.
injuries. But yeah, there is something about dance that I cherish a lot, but at the same time I feel like I've managed to somehow for myself prevent it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, because you've been teaching so many people. How do you help people to actually develop this neutrality? Because I think this is really priceless.
Mm. Yeah, I think um, for sure there is something, like you say, in that dance environment that is a bit, that gives maybe sometimes too much space for those like fragilities, or like you know this kind of being overly sensitive. um, but I honestly think that like to develop more like a closer or a better relationship with your own body or your own sensations will be the best guide somehow, and then of course to follow people that you trust, so that if they say like this cannot harm you, or like you do this thing, you avoid pain, you do it gradually, the body will adapt. Like, also I think there is a lot in the like a process oriented work that can build that trust, so it's not like you come one day and I tell you like today do this, like no problem, it's like, okay, we need to build not just the trust of you trusting me, but also the trust of your body trusting you, and like everything slowly adapting, and like how you like the body can change, and that change happens like over time, and with process, and um so yeah, I don't have somehow like a better answer to it. I just think that like encouraging people to go a bit further, but not to the place maybe that is like too much, because yeah, then you can traumatize yourself, or like create bad experiences, or so. And that's also something I think I learned from different people on the way, that like if there is something you are interested in, you want to go there, like you need to gradually introduce it, you need to build a certain relationship to it, and that I think it's the same with things that are involved, like that there is more risk involved.
I really enjoy how you phrase it, because that you need to give time for the body to trust you, which is a
Mm,
little bit like, most of the time we say, yeah, I need to learn how to trust my body, but yes, it's very interesting to think about it like this, because I guess to a certain degree we do need to give time for certain systems that are not in control, enough time to kind of register those new experiences, like the nervous system, and
exactly.
and and then it's not a one side road that you need to trust the body, but also that the body needs to trust you in time. It's a very refreshing way to look at it.
Yeah, because maybe I have some kind of a fantasy or some kind of an idea about something I want to do, and I think I can do, but yeah, but my body needs to trust that it can do it, and yeah, that would take time, and often, and it's not just the time, it's the work that you will do during that time, and sometimes it would mean to build more muscles to protect certain areas, and sometimes it would mean to build more mobility, and sometimes like sometimes it would be really to build very physical attributes in order to create that trust, and sometimes it would be more mental and emotional work to create that trust. But I think it's very rarely would happen like in one day, or you know
Totally. And also another thing that I've noticed, that when you when you try to kind of answer my question about how to on one hand develop the skill but not develop, let's say, the side effect of the skill, I realized that while you were answering, I realized that, yeah, to a certain degree, it's something that I keep hearing from people I talk to, and also for some people I already hosted in the podcast. And I start to recognize that it's the golden question of how do you for yourself first, and then also for others, when you start guiding people, how can you how can you be in this sweet spot of, I'm not in my comfort zone, but I'm not traumatizing myself, because I think it's a principle that is happening in so many different fields, like from our psychological development to, I don't know, to cooking, like, you need a certain heat for the things to boil, but too much you burn it. And it's really, yeah, this is like the most complicated thing to answer.
Mm.
It's it's a very, very individual on one hand, but also I guess that there is also certain common thing between people.
Yeah, but I think also sometimes we do things and we think um, like that there is a full package coming with it, but actually maybe a lot of this package is not a must, it's not needed. And like, just yesterday I was doing some strength work for my legs, and I felt like how there is so much tension coming up here, and I thought like, but this is not needed. Like, I don't need to finish the legs session feeling that my shoulders are tight, like, so like I think there is, and then also like psychologically and in all other aspects, like this is something we can do by putting light on those things, and then realizing like, but or like you say, if you hit the floor, like what can still stay maybe soft, or like how can I still, maybe if I need to breathe in a certain moment, or like it's not black and white.
No, for sure not. um, so what would you consider, uh, let's say, as, I mean, I know it's a little bit tough question, but would you consider as the most essential thing to practice? Let's say that I'm hearing this podcast, and I think and I'm inspired by the conversation. I say, yes, I wanna go and develop my own self practice. What would you consider as something that is foundational for you? It could be is it something that connects to material? Is it a principle? What if you would coach me and I don't know anything? What would you start with?
Mm. It is a very tricky question. Well, I will start first. I will say I had this question for a long time, like what is basic? Um, and I think it was also around this time that um, like uh, I think actually Ido Portal like published this like a series of videos of like upper body basics, like strength basics. And I remember I looked at it and I thought like, wow, but this is like, for me, this is really not basic. This is like something I will never do. And then I thought, okay, but then like what is basic? What is basic? Like, because of course when you ask this, you very quickly come to the conclusion that it depends, like what are you doing, what are you dealing with. So of course, like what is basic for a dancer will not be the same as what is basic for like a soccer player, or for like a, I don't know, like a pizza chef. Like it's completely different. So I kind of came to the conclusion that the only thing that you need in all these fields, or in all fields, in order to do some kind of a progress, is awareness. Like you need to be first aware of the situation before you can change it. Like if I'm aware, like in I'm aware of what I'm able to do now, or what is it that I am doing now, then I can start to change it. I can start a certain process. But if I'm not aware of it, if I'm not aware of myself, like what can I do? I can tell you like, oh, I really want to be like a good person, but I treat you bad and I don't notice, like I'm not aware of it. And like, how am I going to make any progress? And then I think developing awareness can be done in many different ways. And it also depends like what kind of awareness then you want to do. If it's a physical awareness, then it can be just like it can start from very simple things, like something I like to do with people that I start to work with, and I like to develop awareness to the feet. Then I would just like I would make them activate the feet very strongly, like really spread the toes and and make the feet very wide, um, just to create sensation, to create physical sensation in the feet. Because I find that um, that working with tension often helps to sense, like to feel where is the movement, where is the body part that I'm working with. um, and then often people ask, but like why like this, like why do you choose that? And I say it doesn't matter. At the same time, I could also say like just cramp your toes and keep them cramped for like always, and that would also develop awareness. So the aesthetic choice was my own aesthetic choice, and it doesn't really matter. What matters is that I gave you a clear cue that if you don't do it, I can tell you, hey, you're not doing it. And then you will be aware of it gradually, that you are not doing it, and you will change it. um,
It's very interesting, because I can totally agree with it.
mm,
That like for that, because I think it relates maybe to how I understand attention from doing meditation. Is that the moment there is a certain intensity, the mind goes there, and it's very clear to notice what is happening. But at the same time, I can also agree. Like there is a famous sentence from Steve Paxton, the founder of contact improvisation, that he would say like, tension masks sensation,
yeah,
which to a certain degree it's also true, because when there is tension, then you sense like the most obvious thing, but you
yeah,
don't miss the subtle thing. And so in a way, it's a very beautiful thing to start with, because it's like it's a gradual way to enter, let's say, the realm of sensing yourself. No.
exactly. And that's why, if I take this example of the feet, it's not like you always have to tense your feet in order to be aware of them. It's just the starting point. It's just to create the first layer of awareness to your feet. And then once you're aware of them, you can do whatever you want. The problem is when people get attached to the aesthetic choice, and then it's like, this means awareness, but it's not that this means awareness. This is just one tool. Um, so it could be really whatever you decide, like whatever you decide that is something clear that you could point out and say like, no, now you're not doing it, now you're doing it. So if I want to decide like I always keep my shoulders down, then every time I do this, it's like, yeah, I changed, I'm not doing it. And then I will gradually become aware of where is the problem, and I will be able to change it. So I would say like that's something that I found that is quite basic. Um, and then in terms of like what is fundamental in terms of like moving the body and what to do with it, like it's very difficult to say. I think it really depends on like what you want to do. So if we talk about dance, like if you want to dance, what I do is like I found kind of a way to divide the body to three main areas, like arms, legs, and spine. And I gradually um, address more movement possibilities. Like I expose people gradually to what each one of those parts can do, like on the biomechanical level, and then on the more like coordinational level, then more of a quality, like, and then I gradually build it up into something more complete. But I think that the starting point is often quite technical. It's quite technical and it's quite simple, not simple in the sense that it's easy, but it's very blunt, it's
Mm.
very, there is no question. Like when I see what you're doing, I can say you're doing it or you're not doing it. It's not so much about the feel or about the sensation or the quality in the beginning.
It's interesting because you said this twice. This this moment where somebody from the outside can clearly say yes or no, and in a way, I think it's, if we are thinking about what you said in the beginning, that the self practice slowly expand into what you coined as life practice. So in a way, maybe a universal tool, I think, because to find a certain way that helps you to provoke awareness while simultaneously having an objective mirror that can tell you, man, you're off the track. And 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 I can see it. I don't know. Now I'm I'm busy with the idea of learning how to be a better conversational partner. So you're now literally participating in my self experiment.
With pleasure.
With pleasure. And I've noticed that yeah, that to a certain degree, I've developed myself a certain system at home that when I like to have more awareness to something, I print notes and I hang them in certain areas at home, and then I get reminders of things
Mm.
that are just, and that's kind of like the external cue that you're mentioning. That's like kind of cramping my feet or
Mm-hmm.
spreading. I would go for spreading the feet if I have to choose between cramping and spreading.
Good.
So that's the spreading the feet. I have the notes. This is like, okay, notes kind of reminding me. And then there is a certain internal process of starting to disconnect from this note and then having some internal cues. And at the same time, of course, then the external feedback, which would be, okay, my kids, my wife, who
Mm.
can refer to how the things that I'm trying to change. And it's very interesting to see how you can take something that is extremely, let's say, technical, and let's say that looks insignificant to life, like the shape that you currently have in your feet, and how you can take the same principle that you offered and apply it much wider into things that could really change your relationship with people. And
Yeah, I think also this is one thing that is a bit tricky about dance or about like working with the body alone sometimes, is you don't have always such a direct feedback. It's not like, maybe from your experience with working with like contact improvisation or with the MMA, you have a very clear feedback. Like if you are not in the right place, it's not going to work, or your mind was somewhere else, like you get, you get punched in the face or whatever. And also like I experience it now when I work with pottery and clay. Like the feedback is really direct. You have the material in front of you, and if you're not centered, if you're not doing the right thing, it falls apart. But in dance it can be very tricky because sometimes it's, I mean, I don't know if you, for sure you had maybe that experience of, you work with a choreographer or something, you do something and then suddenly they're like yes, and you're like, but what was it? Like I don't know. Like it's many times it's ungraspable. So I find that having those really practical clear things, um, from my experience, they help people progress tremendously, because yeah, sometimes it's needed to have that very clear direct feedback that you can hear, like, no, now you are not doing it, like I asked you to do something else, you did something different. um yeah.
And maybe like I can take what you're saying and go a little bit to a new area that I wanted to hear your thoughts. So I know that you another thing that I've seen that you have done in the field of dance that I think was very unique, at least in the European scene that I'm more familiar with, is that you've really developed very intense relationship with your teachers, so in relationship that were much more than uh, just saying that they're a great teacher, but really developing a personal relationship, practicing for many years with the same teacher. And then you also started to do it with your students. And just to clarify for people who are listening who are not coming from the field of contemporary dance, the culture is the complete opposite. There is a
Mm.
culture of workshops, of going to short-term experiences, going to festival where you meet 300 people in 5 days and you just take a lot of dance espressos.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share a little bit like why was it important for you? And
um yeah, I think also it was one of those things that like nobody ever talked about, um that importance of like following the same source of information for a long time. And um and maybe also it wouldn't wake up in me unless I would meet like the right person, and so that happened when I was in Salzburg, and I met Martin Kilvadi, and um, he was the first one that kind of spoke about doing the same thing for years. And I remember, like, literally he was giving some scores or some exercises, and he was like, do it for 5 years, then tell me if it works. And I was like, you got it. Like, I'm gonna do it for 5 years.
crazy.
um I was really like excited by that, that there is a person that is actually that has a practice. Um and also, like I said before, I just felt that there was so much knowledge and experience and so many things to learn from. And I just felt like I want to stick around, like I want to get more of that. um and at that time there was not really a structure to facilitate that wish or that need that I had, so I just kind of created that structure for myself. And I just, like, I was there all the time, like whenever I could. And
You mean
then
there in his seminars?
in his workshops, I joined him for long periods when he went to teach in some places. I would fly all the way to Brussels just to see him performing and coming back. And like, and I remember for some people it was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? And for me it was like, what is better? What can I do better than this? Like, this is, I felt really I'm investing in my education, and I'm investing in my own development. And I started with time to feel the benefits of this, of like doing it in this way. And I wanted to create a structure that I can offer to other people that expressed that interest. um, so when I started to teach more open workshops and stuff like this, and I noticed that some people are coming back again and again. um, and like I said before, I also started to have the need to engage in a longer process with the same people. So in the beginning, I started to create kind of a series of workshops that people could come to several workshops, and that there will be like a continuation. Um, But then I started with like the online thing, which allowed me to keep also in even closer contact with people, or like more regular, more frequent. And yeah, I feel this is something that, in some disciplines, it's obvious to have that kind of relationship. Like in martial arts, like you have your teacher. You don't go take workshops. Like, I mean, maybe if there is a master coming or something, and it's like, and you are allowed to go, then you would go. But this thing of like that we have in the dance world, it's very different. And or if you learn music, you don't go to learn from different teachers. You have your piano teacher, and you go to that teacher every week and once a week, and between the classes you practice on your own. Like, that's how it's done. um
But it's interesting, like, because I think, like, you brought you mentioned the word of martial art, which is pretty true, that you have your coach or your teacher. But it's interesting to notice that also that there is that the like, because contemporary dance always aim to reinvent itself, and one thing that is totally present is this kind of culture. But now in the world of martial art, which is kind of more traditional and rigid, it starts to actually borrow these principles.
mm,
And you see more, like, especially in the world of mixed martial art, you see people doing cross training and going to other
mm,
gyms to see. And yeah, and I
yeah,
guess that there is a certain, again, like a middle ground that is
yeah.
maybe
Of course,
interesting.
also it's different because many dancers, like if you want to work as a dancer, you have to be versatile. You have to be able to do like different styles, or so it also depends like what you're interested to do as a dancer. But like I said, there was this moment I felt like performing was not anymore the focus, and it was more like to develop a relationship with dance as a practice, as a tool, as a platform. So for me, it was only natural to really dive into the same thing. And yeah,
So,
and
so maybe you can tell a little bit for those who might be interested. What do you do with this, your online programs, and what do you offer to the world actually?
mm, so, well, I can start by saying that it actually started, like I said, from that need of those people, and their expression of like wanting to stay around, to stay involved, uh, and also recognizing that there is depth, that there is process that cannot be grasped in a weekend workshop or something like this. um, so I started to do it only with those people. So those were people that I knew already. I already spent time with them. They were familiar with my work. um, and that was kind of like the starting point. And from there, it opened up um, to other people, like people that are actually today. I have students that I never met in person, um, that are studying with me for years now. um, and this is something that is always important for me to communicate from the beginning. Like, this is a process oriented work. It's not for people that are kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna, I have a free month, like I was thinking to do a bit of movement thing, or like, no, this is not what I do. Like, I do something that I have kind of a vision. um, and at the same time, it's like, like I said, I come from the world of dance, and I have that kind of perspective, but I'm not doing it as a purpose for people to become dancers. you know um it's more, yeah, like to develop a certain understanding towards the body, to develop certain abilities. And there is the touch, or like the hint of dance, but um yeah, it's not only for dancers, or for people that wants to become dancers. um so what I offer is yeah, I offer like a kind of a regular communication um, with the students, like they get a very clear program that is like built in a kind of a long term thinking um, that starts, like I said, from this division of the body to different areas, first developing those layers of awareness. And then, of course, it's also personalized. So for people that have more limitations in certain things and they have different needs, then I would address that. Um, yeah, that's kind of.
So where do one sign up?
um, well, you can always write me an email. You can find my email like on my website, shaifaran.com. Um, you can see some videos of students of mine on my Instagram account and on my Facebook page. Um, yeah, and I can
And what
share more.
I can really support by saying that, yeah, Shai, that you're really an incredible teacher, and I've learned personally a lot from being with you in the studio and see how you teach and see how you treat your own body. And yeah, I mean, I've definitely very grateful to that we met, because yeah, you played also a very important role in my development. Although we always had this relationship of more colleagues, kind of
Mm.
kind of sneaking into each other's classes rather than really spending being in this student teacher relationship. But nevertheless, I feel like I took a lot of things from you, and I can really recommend with my whole heart you as a teacher. And also, I think that what I also find unique is that you really pay attention to the personal level and not only to the professional level when you engage with people. So you really care about the people you you teach, which is something that is not always present when people become successful, and many people want their attention, so people are losing this quality. And I really can say that's something I think that you've managed to really maintain within the what you offer.
Well, thank you for saying that. Like I really appreciate it. Um, yeah, it's very it's very nice to hear. And I will just say, yeah, about this. Like I said before, I don't really have so much of that separation of work and life, or like um, and I think, of course, when I'm in the role of a teacher, it is a role. But I think, I always say this to my students, like the day that I will not care, I will stop teaching, because like, of course, this is what it is. For me, like it's so much about that. It's so much about uh, yeah, the people that I work with. And like I feel uh, or like I really make it a point to make people feel that they are seen, and that there is a place for them to be seen and to be heard. And yeah, it's my interest, it's my interest to create those relationships. It's not just giving information. And and also, I think it's something that's sometimes it's strange for people, because we are living in such a culture of like consuming, or like you think you pay for something, then you get it and you don't have any responsibility. But for me, it's not like this. And I find sometimes, even with students that I meet face to face, that there is this feeling of like, but like, you are working for us, kind of like but no, it's a both way um, kind of communication. Like, I also need to be nourished, I also need to be inspired. So when I, yeah, like for me, it's kind of like it's a very important part of the work, I would say.
Yeah, and you're definitely a good model for embodying it. Shai, yeah, I think, I mean, we've been talking already for an hour and a half, and I think a
Okay.
bit more. And there's definitely, like, I still have some question in my list, but
Oh,
it's a good sign that I need to invite you again to the podcast in the future.
with pleasure.
And yeah, and I will definitely leave all your links to your website, Instagram, Facebook, everything that is out there for people who are interested in following and checking what you're doing. And yeah, and I want to really thank you for coming and spending this time with me. I definitely learned a lot again from hearing you. And
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I wish to have more of those conversations. I think it's something really great to have, like to have around you people that you can share, like yeah, the intellectual side and the artistic side and the more personal side, and you know, like I like when all those layers are mixed. So thank you for offering that.
amen to that. Thank you, Shai.
Thank you.
For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.